Run free and dive into the sky. Hear the wind crying out its prayer. Why are we so ashamed to be alive? Break the chains and our freedom's ours to take.
Hey guys, Steffi this side. Today in the first part of this video, we'll be learning on what and how to select components to build a custom PC. And in the second part, we'll be assembling those same components to build our own PC. So to build any basic PC, let's talk about the must-have components. First is your power supply, then motherboard, processor, RAMs, your hard drive, and a cabinet in which you'll assemble all these components. So let's discuss them one by one. First is your power supply. Power supply is one of the most important components of any custom PC build because it is actually the component which is supplying power to all the other parts. So it's very important that you choose your power supply carefully only after you have done your complete research and only when you're absolutely sure. For that, first you need to calculate the wattages of all the components you are going to use in your PC build. Only when you have that final figure, you can choose your power supply accurately. And if you want a dedicated video on how to choose a power supply because it is one of the most important component, let me know in the comment section. So now moving on to the next part, we have the motherboard. Motherboard is that component to which all the other major PC components connects to, like your processor, your RAMs, your graphics card, your power supply. So while choosing a motherboard, take care of following things. First is the processor. Which processor you are going for? An Intel one or an AMD one? And which generation it is of. Like for example, if you are going for Intel's 7th generation of processors, you need 200 series of motherboard. And if you are going for Intel's 8th generation of processors, you need 300 series of motherboard. So choose accordingly. And also how much and which RAM you are using also affects the selection of your motherboard. Like for example, you are going for a RAM which has a speed of 3200 MHz, but your motherboard doesn't support that speed. So it's total waste of money. Also, how much RAM you are going to install in your PC also affects the selection of your motherboard. Like we have motherboards which support somewhere from 2 to 8 memory sticks. So depending upon your requirement, choose your motherboard accordingly. Now next in line for the discussions are the processors. In the market, we only have two major players, Intel and AMD. And at this point of time, honestly, it's just a matter of personal choice. You cannot go wrong with either of them. Both are really good. And they are even priced similarly and they offer options for anything and everything. But remember, both have different sets of motherboards. So choose accordingly. Now, next thing for the discussions are the RAMs. First, you need to decide how much RAM you want. 16, 32, 64. But if you ask me, you can see a noticeable difference between two PCs having 8 GBs and 16 GBs of memory, but you won't be able to tell much difference between two PCs with 16 and 32 gigs or two PCs with 32 and 64 gigs. So 16 GB is more than sufficient. After deciding how much RAM you need, now let's talk about the speed of the RAMs. Speed can go as high as up to 4000 MHz, but you don't need that. If you want a decent RAM with a decent performance and with a decent price tag, you should go for options like 2400 MHz or 2666 MHz. But if you want to go higher, and unless you are overclocking your PC, you won't be able to tell the difference. So go with options 2400 MHz and 2666 MHz. Now the next thing we need for our PC is the storage. And generally in most of the basic computers, we only have hard drives. We install our operating system on them and we use them for storing our data. But while looking for a hard drive, look for the RPM. In market, there is generally a 5400 RPM version, but there's a higher version also, which has a 7200 RPM. So go for the 7200 RPM because higher is better and there's not much of a price difference. But if you want more performance from your PC, go with the dual storage system. Install an SSD for installing your operating system and all the other applications, and install an hard drive for storing your data. You can absolutely see the performance difference. But of course, SSDs are expensive, so there's that. Now let's talk about the last component, which is the cabinet. Cabinet is basically a body in which all the other components get assembled, and you can buy any cabinet you want: black, white, expensive one, cheaper one, grey, pink, anything you want. Just only take care of one thing, that it has proper ventilation, which means proper airflow can be maintained inside the cabinet, because it's get really hot in there and you just absolutely don't want that. Trust me, you don't want that. And if it's happening, it's bad. it's really bad. So these were the components that you need to build any basic PC. But now let's talk about what components we will be using in our PC build. First is the power supply. We'll be using Corsair 650 watt semi-modular bronze certified power supply, and I choose this after proper research, and I'll sure it will take care of all my components. Next is the motherboard. We are going to use Asus ROG Z370E. I specifically went for this one because it has all the things I need. Supports my processor, my RAM, supports SLI bridge if I ever want to use 2 graphics card, and also it has native Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. And of course, it looks cool. Next we have our processor of choice, Intel's 8th generation Core i7-8700K processor. It's a hexa-core processor with 12 MB of cache memory and has a base clock speed of 3.7 GHz, which turbo boosts up to 4.7 GHz. And also it has Intel's hyper-threading technology, turbo boost version 2, overclock capable, all that normal stuff. Moving on, we have our RAM, and we'll be using 2 sticks of 8 GB of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAMs, and they have a speed of 2400 MHz, and they're supported by my motherboard as well as my processor. Next comes the storage. We are going for a dual storage PC, that is, we'll be using a 250 GB of Samsung 860 EVO SSD for installing the operating system and the other applications. And for storage purpose, we are using Seagate Barracuda 2 TB hard drive with 7200 RPM rather than the standard 5400 RPM. And for the cabinet, we are using a non-expensive Chiptronics cabinet, and I went for this one because of the ventilation. It has 2 fans in the front for sucking the air and 1 fan on the back side to blow the hot air out. But as we are building a PC for video editing, we need a graphics card also. For that, we are going for Asus GeForce GTX 1060 6GB overclock edition. It is more than sufficient for what I am going to use this PC for. You can go for 1070, 1080 or even 1080 Ti if you want, that's your choice. Last we have an air cooler, and I went for Deepcool Gamex GT air cooler, and I went for an air cooler rather than an all-in-one liquid cooler because I think I don't need a liquid one. But anyways, if I ever feel the need, I'll buy one. So these are the components with which we are going to build our PC in the next video. So that's pretty much it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Namaste.